Well, it's a brand new year, and maybe 2023 will bring, I don't know, a little bit of optimism to the good fans of Detroit. It's been a while. They were hoping for some better things in 2022, but they took a few steps back. But Scott Bentley of Locked On Tigers is here to say whether or not 2023 might bring around something a little better. This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been podcasting for well over the last decade, and I'm now beginning my fifth year. This will be my fifth season as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can follow the show at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at Sully Baseball Podcast. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe at all the places you subscribe to listen to your podcast. And be sure to tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On MLB, or check out some of the other great shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, including, and as always, I pick these totally at random, Locked On Tigers with Scott Bentley. And oh my goodness, by a complete coincidence, sitting in the waiting room, let's just get right to it. The host of the Locked On Tigers podcast, our old friend coming back. Welcome back, Scott Bentley.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, it's been a minute. I'm sure the last time you and I spoke, there was a little bit more optimism on my end. Actually, I think the last time was probably about Miguel Cabrera, so maybe that was a fun
Yeah.
episode. I think.
Well, yeah, and I get accused of bias. Well, I get accused. Everyone thinks I'm against their team. Everybody. I want to just state, and I think this is important. I have the official Locked On tablet here, and this is just for legal purposes. Uh, as a host of the Locked On Podcast Network, I legally have to inform you, the viewers, that I am indeed biased against your specific team, whichever team you listen to. I'm against them and have a pathological hatred towards them, and I'm always clearly rooting for the other team. So I have to say that is part. You're right. Everyone who says that I'm biased and I cannot be objective. And as those Astros fans who accuse me of having a pathological hatred for the Astros, even though I rooted for them in the 2021 and 2022 World Series, back-to-back years, I wanted them to win the World Series, and that is a sign of pathology of my hatred of them. I've been accused of ignoring the Tigers. And from our conversation we had before we hit record on this, ignoring the Tigers probably would have been a good thing to do last year. Scott, what happened? This year was supposed to be a step forward for them.
Yeah, it really was. It was certainly a very disappointing season. I think when you look around baseball and you try to I don't really like ranking things too often, but if you were to try and talk about the teams that had the most disappointing seasons, I think right after you get past like the Giants and the White Sox are probably at the top of that list. And then in that tier right below them, you're probably having a conversation about the Tigers. That it was a really, really frustrating season. There were some bright spots on the pitching side of things, but this was legitimately, depending on what stats you look at, one of the worst offenses in modern baseball history.
Yeah.
And that is why we found ourselves where at the bottom of baseball yet again for where we've been for a majority of the last 6 years at this point.
For people who haven't been following the Tigers over the last, in the post Miguel, the post Jim Leland years,
Yep.
um, they hovered right around 500 in 2021, with the exception of April. They
Yep.
lost they started the season 8-19. It was an absolute calamity out of the gate. But they had a winning May, they had a winning June, they had a winning July, and a winning September, and they were just barely under 500 in August. And for you and for me, you could see, hey, look at that's the majority of the year they were above 500 by a game or so. It just was so skewed because of the disastrous start that they wound up with a losing record. But it was you and I were both of the mindset of, hey, this is a team that's no longer a punching bag, no longer people circling that on the schedule as if to say, okay, here's an easy 2 wins in a 3-game set. And man, the optimism, and they picked up Baez, they picked up Rodriguez. The optimism just went away right away with another disastrous April, except they kept having disastrous months after that.
Right. Yeah. No. There was no rebound month for sure. And yeah, this is a like you said, a team that after last season, a lot of people had a lot of optimism towards, and then went out and did spend some money, and we can debate the allocation of funds all we want, but at the end of the day, this was a team that finished just under 500 on the season, and in the offseason added two of the top 5 prospects in baseball in Torkelson and Green, Austin Meadows, who was traded for right before the season started, and Baez, Erod, and I guess you can throw Tucker Barnhart in there. Like, this is a
Yeah.
team that was just under 500 and added like 6 impact players. And then the season rolled around, and it was one of the most, honestly, unbelievable is the word. I've never seen anything like it, in the sense of every single hitter on the team had like their career worst season outside of like Eric Haas, and that's pretty much it. Um, and it was a whole lineup of below league average hitters, and we had everyday players with OPSs in the 500s, and then like we had a ton of injuries and like off the field stuff where players weren't playing for months on end, and not even injury related, just like stopped playing, like in Eduardo Rodriguez's case, and like it was unbelievable. It was I've never seen anything like it. It was truly a historic season for all of the wrong reasons, and especially, as you said, highlighted on the offensive side of the ball. It was just absolutely dreadful. Just no offense for 162 games.
Yeah, it really is astonishing. Like, look at, I know that Comerica, it's still Comerica, right? They
Yep.
changed,
Yeah.
they changed stadium names so
Yeah.
fast. I wind up saying it's Safeco. No, it's actually
Right. Yeah.
it's Cricket Wireless or whatever. Um, Yeah, I have up. I have baseballreference.com, the single greatest website in the history of the planet Earth. I have their 2022 stats up there. Haas is the only everyday player who had an OPS over 700 and an OPS plus in the triple digits.
Yeah.
Caveat: Riley Green's OPS plus was at 99, so that's tapping out. But still, when you're having to say, "Hey, he almost was league average," that's grotesque. And just, I mean, one of the amazing things about this team is if you're into traditional stats, if you want batting averages, those are low. You want home run totals. The Baez led the team with 17. If you're still counting RBI, nobody busted 70. If you're into more of the sabermetrics world, I brought up the OPS plus, where one player was above the league average. If you're into WAR, I mean, I know some of my listeners are only 2 players busted 2 WAR the entire year, and no one got to the right side of 3. And this is the whole team. And this is the thing that I just look at it like, yes, you can see 1 or 2 players regress. Okay, 1 or 2 players may come back. You had the whole team.
Right. Yeah, that was it was literally every single player, again, outside of Eric Haas, had the worst year of their career. And uh, some of that, I think people are banking on. I'm sure we'll talk about 2023 here in a sec, but I think some people are banking on like some of those players kind of bouncing back a little bit. But it was remarkable for all the wrong reasons. I mean, everyone had a career bad year, and then the prospects on the offensive side of the ball, like Green and Torkelson, Green wasn't bad, and then Torkelson got demoted halfway through the season and spent 2 months in AAA. He was
Right.
dreadful at the plate, and that's supposed to be one of the best college hitters, of recent memory. It just again, there was a few things on the pitching side of the ball that did go well, and I think the team deserves a ton of credit with that, and developmentally deserves a lot of credit because there's some youth too. But offensively, it really was a Murphy's Law season. That it was everything that could have possibly have gone wrong. Not only went wrong, but was in its worst case scenario form.
Well, look at what they did is they gambled. I mean, they gambled on something. They gambled that the fact that they were hovering around 500 for most of the season last year, and you make a few improvements there. They thought the odds were in their favor, and they bet on this team to be a little better. And it did not every bet works out, and I can tell you that not every bet works out because I find myself often at Bet Online, which remains the number one spot for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to the National College Football Championship coming up, to basketball, both pro and college, and the NHL. They got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, if you're listening to us in the middle of January, I'm guessing you do, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. You didn't know that was the theme.
That was
So
great.
we're here with Scott Bentley of Locked On Tigers, doing an autopsy on the death of the Detroit Tigers. Hinch is still there as manager. Who the hell was the All-Star candidate who was the All-Star representative is, I guess, the word.
It,
Uh,
it's been Gregory Soto for 2 years in a row.
yeah, I guess
And
that makes sense because he actually did have a good year.
yeah,
I mean,
well, yeah, he's probably
relatively.
he's probably I would be pretty confident in saying he is the second most controversial player on the entire roster, only behind probably Javi Baez. And the reason for that is just because he's one of those he's just one of those stereotypical closers that is really good in save situations and really not good in every other situation. And he also has a 6 walk per 9, and people just can't stand the fact that he can't throw strikes sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, he had a solid year, I guess I would say, but I think people were expecting a lot more from him this year as well. Like, people always kind of make fun of the fact that he was our representative this year, honestly. So yeah, all around, just a heck of a season up north. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look at I don't really look at wins and losses. I don't think, especially the way we handle pitching staffs now, they tell you virtually nothing.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of a red flag when your closer's record is 2-11. I
Yeah,
mean,
he's the oh man, I wish I could remember the stat off the top of my head. I think it was a very small number of closers in recent memory, one of fill in the blank amount, really small number, that had over double digit losses and 30 saves, I
yeah.
think. So yeah, that's the kind of pitcher that Gregory Soto is. Yeah.
Look, I look at I have virtually I have virtually no value in the save stat. I think it tells you very little. I mean, if you're winning 5-2 and you let up 2 home runs and get the final out, you get a save. I mean, you could have legitimately bad outings and still wind up with a save. I think that there are other metrics you can use to determine the effectiveness of a reliever, which is one reason why I was like, Francona of Cleveland and or earlier of Boston seemed to ignore what I call the tyranny of the save, which was sometimes managing where, hey, it's the 7th inning, got to bring my best reliever right now.
Right.
And instead of being like, I remember there was one specific year where Matt Williams was managing the Nationals in an elimination game, and he didn't bring in some of his best relievers during a Giants rally because he said, "Well, this guy's our sixth inning guy. This guy's our seventh. No, the season's on the line. Bring use your
Yeah,
best."
we had a lot of that actually you mentioned him earlier. We had a lot of that with Jim Leland. We had a lot of like this is the seventh inning guy no matter what kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and look what happened. I mean, the Tigers had really one of the had a Atlanta Braves of the 90s level starting rotation
Yep.
in the 2010s and won that stretch with Jim Leland. They won one World Series game.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not trying to pour salt in the wound, but it just seemed like every single year it was the same issue, which was there's no closer. I mean, think about
Yeah.
I mean, Verlander and Scherzer obviously won Cy Youngs with the team. Price was there for an hour and a half, and he had been a Cy Young Award winner. Porcello went on to win a Cy Young Award. Robbie Ray went on to win a Cy Young Award. I mean, the number. I mean, that doesn't even count like Anibal Sanchez and some of the other pitchers who were really.
Anibal had an ERA title in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, all these remarkable pitchers, like old school workhorses, plus a Hall of Famer's prime,
Yeah.
and they're always winning. We're always winning the division, and yet, how many times was it? The revolving door of closers that just. We'd stop talking about 84 if there were if there was if they had a semi decent closer in 2013. Those two Max Scherzer starts, which the Red Sox hit grand slams
Yeah.
off of the bullpen, we remember those. That Tiger team would have clobbered the Cardinals in the World Series.
I would like to think so. Yeah, no, I mean I argue with anybody that I think the 2013 Tigers roster, there is no team in baseball in the year 2013 that wouldn't have traded our entire roster for their entire roster, and I think it's one of the more talented teams to not win a ring.
And yet, remember who won the ALCS MVP that year was Uehara, which in the
Correct.
end, that was the difference.
Correct. Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think that like that was a really big Dombrowski stereotype for a while, was just like he can do everything except build the bullpen. And yeah, I mean that team, it really, it wasn't even closer specifically really in the postseason. It was just the
No,
entire bullpen. I mean, in 2012, the final out of the ALCS was like
Phil
Phil
Koch.
Koch,
Yeah, it was Phil
right?
Koch.
Like Phil Koch is slamming his glove on the ground
Right.
and whatnot. Like it was just like you said, it was really a revolving door in the pen there for a while, especially like after Valverde. Like he had one really amazing year and then he tailed off, and Benoit had a couple of really good years and then tailed off. There was just no consistency, I guess, is really the way to put it.
Yeah, I think that the year, now granted, I'm going to bring up a year, and Astros fans, please listen to me closely. The 2018 Red Sox did a lot of cheating. There was a lot of shenanigans. There's a black cloud hanging over that title. Those who say I never bring that up. But in terms of the pitching side of it, I think that people should watch what Cora did with the pitching staff, because he had starters coming out of the bullpen. He had
Yeah,
Porcello coming out of the bullpen. He
right.
had Price coming out of the bullpen. Eovaldi pitched like 6 shutout innings out of the bullpen.
Yeah, that
We're
crazy
finally
game.
letting up a home run, but he was used effectively out of the bullpen. He used Sale out of the bullpen. Sale pitched a critical inning out of the bullpen at Yankee Stadium and then threw the clinching pitch of the World Series. He did not care what someone's role was. He said, right now, I need my best pitcher here. And I can't help but think, when you had a staff that was as ludicrously deep as some of those Tiger pitching staffs, if Leland had done a few things like, do you want, screw it, let's bring Verlander in. Screw it, let's bring it, this player in or that player in,
Yeah.
because at this moment that pitcher is the best pitcher available. I can't help but think one of those years things would have clicked instead of
Yeah,
everyone going by their slots.
right. Yeah, absolutely. He brought Scherzer out of the pen for one game in the ALDS, and it was like a bases loaded jam, and then Scherzer got out of it without giving up a run, and it was incredible. And it's like a very uh, fond moment in Tigers lore. And then like that, they were like, yeah, that worked really well. We're not doing it anymore. Like that was just it. Yeah, it was especially again like during the Leland era, especially. I mean, he had his relievers had to have, you're this inning, you're this inning, and that was just how it was going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm look at. We're here with Scott Bentley. I'm not here to pour salt in any wounds right now. Um, the thing that I think must be frustrating for Tiger fans is their pitching staff isn't bad. It's like you've done the hard part. I mean, this is not Scherzer, Verlander, or Porcello again, but it's not bad, and they're young. And you're looking at there is still potential for this team to pitch well, and you would think it would be easier to get a few decent bats in there and hand the ball to an okay pitching staff, especially when you saw that last year Minnesota wound up collapsing down the stretch and Chicago had a disappointing season. This was I don't want to say they would have won the division, but it certainly wasn't a powerhouse division. This would be a year to have taken a step at least closer to 500 instead of regressing back to, what did they lose? 97 games? Was it
Yeah.
96 games? Sorry, I gave them one more loss than they had. Um, all right, this is what should they do? They haven't made any big acquisitions or anything yet. Although we are recording this ahead of time, so I just assume Carlos Correa has been signed by 3 more teams since we've started recording this, and maybe the Tigers were one of them. But what have they done? What should they do? And God, what should their plan be?
Well, first off, we can talk about the moves they have made. They've made 3 moves at the major league level. There's been some some waiver claims, rather, and there's been some minor league deals, but the only major league moves they've made all offseason were bringing in Matthew Boyd back on a
Okay.
1-year deal, and then they signed Michael Lorenzen to a 1-year deal. And then they traded Joe Jimenez to the Atlanta Braves, which is a great situation for him, and got a pair of prospects in return. Justin Henry Malloy, the hitting prospect that they got back, the Tigers are really, really excited about. He walks a ton and is a pretty darn good hitter.
Wait, was Boyd not on the team last year?
No, so he got non-tendered after 2021, then
Right.
got signed by the Giants last year, but got signed with an injury. He had I
Okay.
think it
So
might
he
be
didn't play, right?
right. He didn't pitch a single inning for the Giants, but then they traded him at the deadline as a part of another deal to Seattle. And with Seattle, he did pitch like 13 or 14 innings out of the bullpen for
Okay.
Seattle down the stretch.
I have zero memory of that. I
Well,
just
I don't think very many people outside of maybe those 3 fan bases really do, but
Well, I follow the Giants and the Mariners pretty closely. But yeah, I just like when you said they brought back Matthew Boyd, I quickly scrolled over to so wait a minute, he was a Tiger, right?
yeah,
And
no, he gone for 1 single calendar year, and then right back with a 1-year deal, I guess. So
my apologies to the Boyd family for not keeping tabs of your loved one closer. I was under the impression if you had put $1 million in front of me and said, "What team does Matthew Boyd play for?" I'd say, "I got it, Tigers." And I guess technically I'd be right.
well, yeah,
Still,
now you're
yeah,
right.
now I'm right, but I
You're
would
right.
have.
A month ago, you wouldn't have done it. Now you're
Yeah,
right.
that you know what I had no clue that he was. But I just assumed, yeah, oh yeah, he must have had an off year with Detroit.
Yeah, it was definitely the injury, I think, that
Yeah,
threw a lot of people off because he didn't pitch until I want to say August, for like the first time all year. So,
did he play in
but
the
yeah,
playoffs? Did
that's
he play in the playoffs? I would. Or
yeah. Well, I don't know which series, but he definitely was on the playoff roster for one of them. Yeah.
wow, I was excited for that Mariners team. Um, like boy,
I
this
don't remember
is
if he had any appearances, but I know
okay.
that he made.
I have
I
to.
know that he made the roster in one of the series. Yeah.
I'm doing the scene from Dirty Harry where the guy says, "I gots to know." Yeah, he played 7 years with. He was part of the David Price trade, right?
Yes, yeah. So it was David Price to Toronto for Daniel Norris, who was like one of the best pitching prospects in baseball at the time. And then Matthew Boyd was like the lesser prospect. And now Matthew Boyd is what Matthew Boyd is, and Daniel Norris is what Daniel Norris is.
Well, he pitched a third of an inning in the playoffs. I'm
There you go.
assuming in that 18 inning marathon
Yeah, yeah,
because
maybe.
I pitched 2 innings in that game.
Right.
So.
Of course.
Wow, who knew? All right, look at that. Look at
There
that.
you
I
go.
I don't want to pull a Johnny Carson, but I did not know that. I
Right.
did not know that.
So yeah, so that's it. So the only moves they've made so far are pitching moves. Like they brought in two more starters on 1-year deals, and then they traded away a reliever. And so they have not made a single, at the time of this recording, not one single offensive acquisition has been made at the major league level yet. And this was, again, one of the worst offenses I've ever laid my eyes on. So, like, that's certainly I don't want to say a red flag. Like, this is first year for Scott Harris, the new president of baseball ops. Like, this is his first year here. I'm sure that he's more or less just kind of like seeing what he has. And they have gotten rid of like 15 or 16 players from the 40-man just since the season started. So it's not like there hasn't been a lot of turnover, but it's I think people's patience is just running thin. Like this, we're it's been a long road. It's been a long
Yeah,
road for this team, and so I think a lot of people are just trying to look at. We don't have a third baseman at
yeah,
right now. Like we just don't have one, so that's certainly something that they still need to address. And then all 5 or 6 of their outfielders are all pure lefties, so they want to get a right-handed outfielder, and then like 7 of 8 or 8 of 9 of their infielders that are on the 40 man are all pure righties. So I know that they want a left-handed infielder as well. So just like some more stuff, but I don't expect I think they're banking a lot in 2023 on the offensive side of the ball on some people that had career down years regressing back up and like to the mean, and
right.
then just giving some young bats some opportunities, and they added 5 prospects at the non-tender deadline. So, or at the protect from the Rule 5 draft deadline, they added 5 prospects in that. So I'm sure they're going to give a lot of young players opportunities. And yeah, I think if they're going to do anything, it's going to have to be via a trade because they have like 8 or 9 starting pitchers currently on their roster, and
Right.
they haven't made any bat moves, like I said. So I think a lot of people are trying to maybe kind of look at the starting pitching room and go, like, one of you should probably get traded for a bat at this point. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much what the offseason's been so far.
Yeah. And I just wonder if like, you get to this point when you have some people who are like established major leaguers floating around looking for a gig and maybe having just sticking a professional hitter in the lineup. I'm not saying that Trey Mancini or Evan Longoria are no longer all-stars in their prime, but maybe just having oh, there's a name I effing recognize. Maybe there's just
Right.
something like maybe just having someone who's kind of been there, done that in in a higher level where you can sort of say, okay, we'll give them a shot, and maybe those are just two names right now, or two players who are have had wonderful careers and
Mhm.
everything, and they're no longer at the top of their game, but you're not going to sign them to a Correa like contract. It's probably a 1-year deal, and maybe I don't know. Just I had this same conversation with Peter from Locked On Marlins because another team that has
Yeah.
good pitching, but they
Right.
can't hit. I said maybe bring a couple professional hitters in there. Maybe they'll rub off on some of the other players, and maybe adding another run a game when you have a young pitching staff, maybe you'll build up some of their confidence and build up some of their ability to go through. I don't know. I mean, again, the two that just came to mind were, Longoria and Mancini. Again, we're not talking about bringing in Aaron Judge or Carlos Correa
Right.
here, but those neither one of them will be longer than 1 year, and maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. I mean, I hate to bring this year up again, but the 2013 Red Sox were up and down, filled with we'll take a flyer on Napoli. They acted like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack going into the pro club. I'll get a Mike Napoli there, a Shane Victorino there, a couple of Stephen Drews over here, and all of a sudden I mean, that was the ultimate example of that working. But you're trying to get this team to 500. You saw what happened with Baltimore this year. When Baltimore had their young players, they finally brought them up, and suddenly there was a little bit of juice going on in Baltimore. They didn't win a wild card spot, and they're really ticking off their fans right now because they're sitting out this
Right.
offseason. I thought they were going to be in on Correa, but at least there was a reason to go to the effing ballpark. And you can't just keep the Tigers and the Angels are on the two longest postseason drought
Yeah.
streaks. Is that a word? Drought streak? Yeah, postseason drought.
Yeah, sure.
It's
It
been a
is now.
while. It's been a
Right.
while. It's been a
Yeah,
while.
no.
2014.
2014 is yeah, the last one for both of us. It's
Yeah.
missed the playoffs by like a game in 2016, and ever since then the rebuild started in 2017, and we haven't really been outside of the little, you know, past second half of last year or after April of last year. It's pretty much been in the bottom ever since 2017. And yeah, that 2023 will obviously be 6 years removed of that, 6 7 years. So people's patience is really running thin, and there's a new like top guy in charge, right? Like Scott Harris is new, and I think the honeymoon phase kind of wore off pretty quickly when people realized that we weren't going to get any of these free agents. But yeah, at least he has an identity. He is a big, I want dudes that walk a lot, and he's all about dominating the strike zone and stuff. And so we'll see. But it's definitely a new era, which is at least refreshing given the previous regime. But there is still an unbelievable amount of work to do for a team that has been rebuilding for 7 years now.
So happy New Year, everyone.
Right. Exactly.
Well, hey, thanks for making Locked On MLB your first listen every day. For your second listen, make it Locked On Tigers. But for your third listen, check out Locked On Sports Today for the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's Take of the Day. Locked On Sports Today is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And speaking of podcasts, we're here with Scott Bentley of Locked On Tigers. Tell people where they can listen to your show.
You can listen to the show on, well, any app, YouTube, etc. Just Locked On Tigers. My personal Twitter is at Bentley Scotty, and I have the links to all of my stuff in on my Twitter. And then the Tigers account Twitter is at Locked On Tigers, believe it or not. And yeah, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, etc.
All right, and you can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at Sully Baseball Podcast, and subscribe to us on the YouTubes where you can see our faces, not just be a voice in your ear. I like one of my favorite comments I ever got was on YouTube, which was, "I've always listened to Sully. I've never known what he looks like, and now I know it." So nothing
Nice.
makes me feel better nor more handsome than to know that my visage gets people to say eh.
Yeah.
Saying about the Detroit Tigers and their prospects going into 2023. Who knows? This could be a good year for them. Maybe. Let's hope. That's Scott Bentley, the host of Locked On Tigers. Thanks for being my guest for today. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan of Locked On MLB. Please call me Sully.